Ever wish you could keep an eye on your crops from space? Not just seeing them, but truly understanding their health,
Yeah.
and maybe spotting problems before they're even visible on the ground.
Right.
That's kind of the power that Pharmanaut's bringing to agriculture these days.
Yeah.
They're using satellite imagery and AI to analyze vast fields and give farmers incredible insights. But today we're going to be zooming in on a very specific challenge for farmers.
Yeah. Aphids.
It's fascinating how such tiny creatures,
Yeah.
often just a couple of millimeters long,
Uh,
can cause such significant damage to crops all over the world.
I know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, billions of dollars in agricultural losses every year because of these little guys.
And it's amazing to think that they reproduce asexually,
Right.
giving birth to live young.
Uh-huh.
So you can see how quickly a small problem can become a massive infestation.
Yeah, and that rapid reproduction is a key factor driving those huge agricultural losses.
A few aphids today can turn into a full-blown crisis just in a matter of days,
Wow.
especially when the weather is warm and dry.
It's interesting. We often think of aphids as just being green, but they come in a surprising range of colors.
Yeah.
Yellow, black, brown, even red.
That's right.
I was curious what they call them in Nepali,
Oh, really?
and it's lahikira.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and each color can indicate a different species
Right.
with its own preferences for certain plants.
Oh, that makes sense.
Like, take yellow aphids, for example. They're a particular menace to citrus growers.
So a few yellow dots on a leaf could actually be a much bigger issue developing.
Absolutely.
Ah.
And it's not just the sap they suck from the plants, although that does weaken the plant and impacts its growth.
Yeah.
It's also the honeydew they secrete.
Okay.
This sticky substance attracts ants and can lead to the growth of sooty mold,
Oh, wow.
further damaging the plants.
Really?
And to make matters worse, certain aphids can even transmit plant viruses.
So they're like a triple threat.
Yeah.
They weaken the plant directly, they create conditions for other problems, and they can even spread diseases.
Yeah, it's a nasty combination.
Sounds like early detection is critical in managing these tiny terrors.
You're absolutely right, and that's where technology like Pharmanaut satellite imagery comes in.
Okay.
By analyzing changes in plant color and overall health.
Uh-huh.
Their system can alert farmers to potential infestations before they're even visible to the naked eye.
So it's like having a constant aerial surveillance system watching over your crops.
That's a great way to put it.
So instead of waiting for visible signs of damage, farmers can take proactive steps to address the problem before it spirals out of control.
Exactly.
I'm curious, though, what are some of the factors that contribute to these aphid outbreaks in the first place? Is it just bad luck?
Not just random chances. There are certain conditions that aphids thrive in.
Yeah.
Like we mentioned, warm, dry weather tends to favor their reproduction. Overuse of nitrogen fertilizer can also create lush, succulent growth that aphids find particularly appealing.
Oh, interesting.
And a lack of natural predators like ladybugs or lacewings
Yeah.
can allow aphid populations to explode unchecked.
So it's a combination of environmental factors and the balance of the ecosystem.
Exactly.
And I imagine that's where understanding the data Pharmanaut provides can be incredibly valuable.
It is by identifying areas of stress in a field, farmers can take targeted actions to address the underlying causes of an aphid problem. Whether it's adjusting irrigation,
Right.
modifying fertilizer applications, or even introducing beneficial insects to help control the aphid population naturally.
So it sounds like a much more strategic and sustainable approach than just reacting to an infestation after it's already taken hold.
I think so.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are some of the specific things that people can do to manage aphids, both indoors and out?
Well, the approach depends on the setting.
Sure.
Let's start with indoor plants. If you have a small infestation, you can actually just physically remove the aphids.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or wipe them off with a damp cloth or a gentle spray of water.
So a little hands-on intervention can go a long way.
It can for smaller infestations.
What about if it's a larger infestation or if you just don't want to be handling those little guys directly?
There are some really effective natural solutions you can use.
Okay.
Insecticidal soap and neem oil are two popular options.
Yes, I heard of those.
They work by disrupting the aphid's outer layer, essentially dehydrating them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And another good tool for indoor aphid control are sticky traps.
Oh, yeah. Those are great.
I've seen those yellow sticky traps before. What's the thinking behind those?
They work by attracting flying aphids,
Oh, okay.
preventing them from spreading to other plants and giving you an idea of the severity of the infestation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've covered some basic indoor strategies. What about for those of us with outdoor gardens or even larger scale agricultural operations? What are some of the techniques that can be used to keep aphids in check?
When we move outdoors, the approach shifts a bit.
Okay,
It becomes less about direct intervention and more about creating an environment that's hostile to aphids
right.
while encouraging their natural enemies.
Yeah.
This is where things like companion planting can be really helpful.
Okay.
Certain plants like marigolds and nasturtiums release scents that aphids find repulsive.
So it's like planting a natural barrier to deter those pesky aphids?
Exactly.
Are there other plants that work well for this?
There are quite a few, actually.
Okay.
Garlic, chives, and mint are also known to repel aphids.
Interesting.
And on the flip side, we want to encourage the presence of beneficial insects like ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps.
Right.
These are the natural predators that help keep aphid populations in check.
So it's about fostering a balanced ecosystem in your garden.
Exactly.
It makes sense. What about for larger agricultural settings? Are there any larger scale techniques that are used?
Absolutely. One of the most important strategies is crop rotation.
Okay.
By changing the types of plants grown in a particular area each season,
Yeah,
you disrupt the aphid's life cycle and make it harder for them to establish themselves.
that makes sense. It's like pulling the rug out from under them.
Right.
What about water? Does that play a role in managing aphids?
It certainly can.
Okay.
A strong jet of water from a hose can dislodge aphids from plants,
Yeah.
making them more vulnerable to predators.
Okay.
And in some cases, farmers might use organic sprays like neem oil or insecticidal soap as a last resort.
So it's about combining different approaches and understanding the life cycle of the pest.
Right.
And I imagine that's where having data from something like Pharmanaut can be invaluable.
You're absolutely right. That kind of data allows farmers to take a much more targeted approach to managing aphids,
Yeah.
using the right techniques at the right time to minimize both the impact on the environment and the overall cost.
So it's not just about seeing the problem, it's about understanding it and having the tools to respond effectively.
Exactly.
Speaking of Pharmanaut and its tools, you mentioned earlier that they use artificial intelligence to analyze satellite imagery.
Uh-huh.
Can you explain how that works and why it's important?
Of course, one of the things that makes Pharmanaut so powerful is that it's not just about taking pretty pictures from space.
Okay.
Their system uses advanced algorithms to analyze that imagery,
Yeah.
identifying subtle changes in plant color and health that can indicate an aphid infestation or other problems.
So it's like having an expert eye constantly scanning your fields,
Yes.
even if those fields are hundreds of acres in size.
That's right. It's like having a team of expert agronomists constantly monitoring your crops and providing you with real-time insights.
That's incredible.
This level of analysis goes far beyond what you could do with the naked eye or even with traditional aerial photography.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the intelligence and analysis behind it that truly empowers farmers to make better decisions.
Exactly.
I'm curious, though, how does Pharmanaut's approach compare to other farm monitoring technologies like drones or IoT sensors?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
While drones and IoT sensors can provide valuable data, they both have limitations.
Okay.
Drones require manual operation and their flight time is restricted.
Right.
So they're not always practical for large-scale farms. And IoT sensors, while useful for gathering very specific data points,
Yeah.
only provide a limited snapshot of the overall health of the field.
So it's a trade-off between the depth of information and the breadth of coverage.
Right? What Pharmanaut offers is a unique combination of broad coverage, regular monitoring, and deep analysis thanks to its use of satellite imagery and AI.
Oh,
This makes it a particularly powerful tool for managing large-scale agricultural operations and tackling challenges like aphid infestations effectively.
So it sounds like Pharmanaut provides a more comprehensive and scalable solution for farmers looking to take a data-driven approach to managing their crops.
I think so.
I'm curious, though, can you give us a few specific examples of how this data is actually used by farmers to make decisions?
Certainly,
Yeah.
one of the valuable applications is in precision pesticide application.
Okay.
By pinpointing the exact areas where aphids are present, farmers can avoid blanket spraying entire fields with chemicals,
Right.
which saves money,
Yeah.
reduces environmental impact,
Of course.
and minimizes the risk of pesticide resistance developing in the aphid population.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about using the right tool in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
Are there other examples of how Pharmanaut's data is being used?
Absolutely. Farmers can use the data to optimize irrigation practices,
Oh, okay.
making sure that water is being delivered efficiently to the areas where it's needed most.
Makes sense.
This is particularly important in regions facing drought conditions.
Yeah, of course.
They can also use the data to track the growth and development of their crops over time,
Uh-huh.
identifying areas that might need additional attention or specific nutrient applications.
So it's really about moving from a reactive approach to a proactive one, using data to anticipate problems and make informed decisions.
That's the goal.
I imagine that kind of insight can be a real game changer for farmers, especially as we face the challenges of a changing climate and a growing global population.
You're exactly right by harnessing the power of satellite imagery and AI.
Yeah.
Pharmanaut is helping to equip farmers with the knowledge they need to produce food more sustainably and efficiently, ensuring that we can meet the needs of a growing planet.
That's a fantastic vision. Now, before we delve further into the world of aphids and how they interact with the plants they feed on.
Okay.
Let's take a quick pause. When we come back, we'll be diving deep into the biology of these fascinating and sometimes frustrating creatures.
Sounds good. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of data-driven insights for managing aphid infestations. Right?
But to really appreciate how powerful a tool like Pharmanaut can be,
Yeah.
it helps to understand the biology of these tiny pests and the fascinating,
Okay.
albeit somewhat disturbing, way they feed.
Okay, let's delve into the world of aphids. What makes them such efficient plant suckers?
Aphids, regardless of their color, have these specialized mouthparts called stylets.
Okay.
Imagine them as tiny needle-like structures
Oh, wow.
they use to pierce plant tissue and extract sap.
So it's almost like a microscopic mosquito bite, but instead of blood, they're after the plant's sugary lifeblood.
That's a good analogy.
Does that injection of saliva have any other effects on the plant?
It certainly does. Aphid saliva can actually interfere with the plant's growth hormones, leading to those characteristic symptoms we see with infestations.
Right.
Stunted growth,
Yeah.
curled or distorted leaves,
Uh-huh.
and that sticky honeydew coating we talked about earlier.
But it's amazing how such a tiny creature can have such a significant impact on a plant's physiology.
It is. And you mentioned that some aphids can also transmit viruses. How does that happen?
As aphids move from plant to plant,
Right.
feeding on different individuals,
Uh-huh.
they can pick up viruses from infected plants and spread them to healthy ones through their saliva.
Oh,
It's like a tiny but very efficient disease vector moving through your garden or fields.
so it's a double whammy for the plants. They're being weakened by the aphids feeding, and they're also at risk of contracting potentially devastating diseases.
That's right.
It really highlights the need for early detection and proactive management strategies.
Exactly. The earlier you can identify and address an aphid infestation,
Right.
the better the chances of protecting your plants and minimizing the damage.
Yeah.
And that's where tools like Pharmanaut's satellite imagery can make a huge difference.
Okay.
Instead of waiting for visible signs of an infestation,
Right.
you can get an early warning system that allows you to take action before the problem becomes widespread.
So it's about being proactive rather than reactive. Now, you've mentioned a few times that aphids reproduce asexually, giving birth to live young.
Right.
Can you explain a bit more about how that works and why it's such a significant factor in their ability to quickly infest
Plants. Sure, in many aphid species, females can produce offspring without mating. This is called parthenogenesis,
Okay.
and it means that a single aphid can essentially clone itself,
Wow.
creating a whole army of offspring that are genetically identical to the mother.
That's incredible.
What's even more remarkable is that these young aphids are born pregnant,
Really?
so they can start producing their own offspring very quickly.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like a chain reaction of aphid clones spreading through a plant or a field.
Yeah, it's a very efficient system.
No wonder infestations can explode so quickly.
Yeah.
It sounds like the aphids have evolved a very effective strategy for rapid population growth.
They certainly have, and this rapid reproductive cycle makes them incredibly adaptable and resilient. It also makes it challenging to control them because even if you eliminate most of the aphids, a few survivors can quickly repopulate an area.
Oh, wow.
That's why early detection and a multi-pronged approach to management are so crucial.
So it's not just about getting rid of the aphids, you see. It's about disrupting their life cycle and making it harder for them to reestablish themselves.
Exactly.
It sounds like a constant battle.
In a way it is, but by understanding the biology and behavior of aphids,
Right.
and by utilizing tools like Pharmanaut to gain insights into their populations and movements, we can develop more effective and sustainable strategies for managing these persistent pests.
That's encouraging to hear. So we've covered some of the basic biology of aphids, their feeding habits, and their incredible reproductive capabilities.
Right.
Now let's shift gears and talk about the different strategies that people can use to manage aphid infestations, both indoors and outdoors.
Okay.
You mentioned some of these earlier, but let's delve a little deeper and explore the pros and cons of each approach.
Sounds good. Let's start with indoor plants. Okay.
Where the environment is more controlled and the scale of an infestation is typically smaller.
Right.
One of the simplest and most effective methods for managing aphids indoors is manual removal.
Okay.
This can involve simply wiping them off with a damp cloth or using a gentle spray of water to dislodge them.
That sounds pretty straightforward, especially if you're dealing with a small infestation. Are there any downsides to this approach?
The main drawback is that it can be time-consuming, especially if you have a lot of plants to inspect and treat.
Right.
It also requires close attention to detail to make sure you're removing all the aphids,
Right.
including any tiny nymphs that might be hiding in crevices or on the undersides of leaves.
So it's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
It requires patience and diligence. What about those natural solutions we discussed earlier, like insecticidal soap and neem oil?
Yeah.
How do those work, and what are their benefits and drawbacks?
Insecticidal soap and neem oil are both considered relatively safe and environmentally friendly options for aphid control.
They work by disrupting the aphid's outer layer, essentially dehydrating them.
Right.
Insecticidal soap works by breaking down the insect's waxy coating, while neem oil interferes with their hormone production and feeding behavior.
So they're both targeting the aphid's physiology in different ways. What are the pros and cons of each?
Insecticidal soap is generally considered to be a gentler option,
Okay.
with less potential for harming beneficial insects or causing damage to plants.
Right.
It's also readily available and relatively inexpensive.
That's good.
The downside is that it needs to be applied directly to the aphids to be effective.
Okay.
And it can wash off easily, so you may need to reapply it frequently,
Right.
especially after rain or watering.
So it's a good option for targeted treatments, but might not be as practical for larger infestations. Or if you're dealing with a lot of plants, what about neem oil?
Neem oil is a bit more potent and has a longer residual effect, meaning it continues to work for a few days after application. It also has some antifungal properties, which can be helpful in preventing sooty mold growth.
Right.
However, it can have a strong odor,
Yeah.
and it can sometimes cause leaf burn on sensitive plants.
Oh.
So it's important to test it on a small area first.
So it's a more powerful tool, but you need to use it with a bit more caution. Are there any other indoor aphid control strategies we haven't discussed yet?
Another helpful tool for indoor aphid control are those sticky traps we mentioned earlier.
Right.
They're especially effective for catching flying aphids,
Yeah.
which can help prevent them from spreading to other plants.
Right.
They also give you an idea of the severity of an infestation and can help you monitor the effectiveness of your control methods.
So they're both a control measure and a monitoring tool.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pretty versatile option. Are there any specific tips for using sticky traps effectively?
Yes. A few things to keep in mind.
Okay.
Place the traps near the affected plants, but not directly touching the foliage.
Right.
You want to intercept the flying aphids before they land on your plants.
That makes sense.
Also, check the traps regularly and replace them when they become full of aphids or lose their stickiness.
So it's not a set it and forget it solution. You need to be actively monitoring the traps and replacing them as needed.
That makes sense.
Okay, so we've covered a range of indoor aphid control techniques. What about for those of us with outdoor gardens or even larger scale agricultural operations? What are some of the strategies that can be used to keep aphids in check in those settings?
When we move outdoors, the approach to aphid management shifts a bit. It becomes less about direct intervention and more about creating an environment that's hostile to aphids while fostering conditions that favor their natural enemies.
Right.
This is where practices like companion planting, attracting beneficial insects, and promoting overall biodiversity come into play.
So it's about working with nature rather than against it.
Oh,
I like that approach. Let's start with companion planting. You mentioned earlier that certain plants release scents that aphids find repulsive.
Right.
Can you give us some specific examples of plants that work well for this purpose?
Absolutely. Some of the most popular aphid-repelling companion plants include marigolds, nasturtiums,
Okay.
garlic, chives, and mint.
Mm.
These plants release strong scents that either mask the scent of the plants you're trying to protect or directly repel the aphids.
So it's like creating a natural barrier or a fragrant shield around your vulnerable plants.
Mhm.
Are there any particular strategies for using companion plants effectively?
Yes, a few tips.
Okay.
Plant your companion plants around the perimeter of your garden or interplant them among your susceptible plants.
Okay.
This creates a more widespread scent barrier.
Right.
You can also plant multiple types of companion plants to create a more diverse and potent scent profile.
Makes sense.
And remember to choose companion plants that are well suited to your climate and growing conditions.
So it's about matching the right plants to the right environment. What about attracting beneficial insects?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps are natural predators of aphids. How can we encourage these beneficial insects to visit our gardens and fields?
One of the best ways to attract beneficial insects is to provide them with food and shelter.
Okay.
Planting a variety of flowering plants that provide nectar and pollen will attract a wide range of beneficial insects,
Right.
including those that prey on aphids.
Okay.
You can also create habitat for beneficial insects
Uh-huh.
by leaving some areas of your garden undisturbed,
Okay.
providing piles of rocks or logs,
Yeah.
and avoiding the use of broad-spectrum pesticides that can harm both beneficial and pest insects.
So it's about creating a welcoming environment for the good guys while making it less hospitable for the pests.
It sounds like a more holistic approach to pest management. Are there any other strategies for promoting biodiversity and building a more resilient ecosystem in our gardens and fields?
Absolutely. One of the most important things you can do is to diversify your plantings
Yeah.
instead of planting large monocultures,
Yeah.
which are more susceptible to pests and diseases.
Right.
Try intercropping or planting a variety of different species.
This creates a more complex habitat that supports a wider range of insects, birds, and other wildlife, which can help keep pest populations in check naturally.
So it's about building a web of life
Yeah.
rather than trying to control every single organism within it. That's a fascinating concept. What about for larger agricultural settings?
Right.
Are there any larger scale techniques that can be used to promote biodiversity and manage pests in a more sustainable way?
Certainly crop rotation, which we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
is a key strategy for disrupting pest life cycles and reducing reliance on pesticides.
Right.
Cover cropping,
Okay.
where you plant non-cash crops during the off-season to improve soil health and suppress weeds, can also benefit beneficial insects and create a more balanced ecosystem.
Makes sense.
And agroforestry,
Yeah.
which involves integrating trees or shrubs into agricultural landscapes,
Oh, interesting.
can provide habitat for birds and other wildlife that prey on pests.
So it's about thinking beyond the individual crop and looking at the farm or the field as a whole ecosystem. That's a powerful shift in perspective. What about water? Does that play a role in managing aphids in outdoor settings?
It certainly can. A strong jet of water from a hose can dislodge aphids from plants, making them more vulnerable to predators or simply washing them away.
Right.
This can be a particularly effective technique for managing aphids on small trees or shrubs. For larger scale operations, overhead irrigation can also help to suppress aphid populations, especially during hot, dry weather.
So it's another tool in the arsenal and one that can be relatively low impact compared to chemical pesticides. Speaking of pesticides, what about organic sprays like neem oil or insecticidal soap?
Yeah.
Are those viable options for outdoor aphid control?
They can be, especially for smaller gardens or for targeted treatments.
Okay.
As we discussed earlier, neem oil and insecticidal soap work by disrupting the aphid's physiology. And they're generally considered safer for the environment and beneficial insects than broad-spectrum chemical pesticides.
Yeah.
However, they do have some limitations. They need to be applied thoroughly and repeatedly to be effective, and they can be washed off by rain or irrigation, so timing is important.
So they're not a silver bullet, but they can be a useful part of an integrated pest management approach.
Exactly. It's about using the right tools at the right time and understanding the limitations of each approach.
Right.
And of course, as we've discussed throughout this episode, data from a tool like Farminaut can be incredibly valuable in making those decisions and developing targeted strategies for aphid management.
That's a great point. It's fascinating to see how data analysis and technology can be used to enhance traditional farming practices and create a more sustainable approach to agriculture.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be in the field.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
We have.
from the biology of aphids
Yeah.
to the various methods for managing them both indoors and out.
Oh,
Before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the future of aphid control and what role technology might play in shaping that future.
it's an exciting time to be involved in agriculture.
Yep.
We're seeing a convergence of traditional knowledge and cutting-edge technology.
Yeah, it is really cool.
When it comes to aphid control, I think the future holds even more sophisticated ways to monitor,
Okay.
predict,
Uh-huh.
and manage these persistent pests.
That sounds promising. Can you elaborate on what some of those advancements might look like?
Imagine a world where farmers can receive real-time alerts on their smartphones,
Mm-hmm.
notifying them of potential aphid outbreaks in specific areas of their fields,
Okay.
even before any visible signs appear.
Wow.
This kind of early warning system, powered by AI and machine learning algorithms,
Right.
analyzing data from satellites, weather patterns,
Mhm.
and historical aphid activity,
Okay.
could revolutionize the way we approach pest management.
It's almost like having crystal ball for agriculture, allowing farmers to anticipate challenges and act proactively rather than reactively.
Exactly. And beyond prediction, I believe we'll see more targeted and precise control methods.
Oh,
We're already seeing the development of biopesticides that specifically target aphids while leaving beneficial insects unharmed.
interesting.
And there's ongoing research into using RNA interference technology,
Hmm.
which essentially silences specific genes in aphids,
Wow.
disrupting their development or feeding behavior.
So it's about finding ways to control aphids more effectively while minimizing the impact on the environment and other organisms.
Mhm.
What about the role of data and technology in helping us understand aphids better?
That's a crucial aspect as well. By collecting and analyzing massive amounts of data on aphid populations,
Yeah.
their movements, and their
Right.
responses to different environmental factors and control methods,
Okay.
we can gain deeper insights into their biology and behavior.
Makes sense.
This knowledge will be essential in developing more effective and sustainable long-term strategies for managing these pests.
It's fascinating to think about how technology can help us bridge the gap between the microscopic world of aphids and the vast scale of agricultural landscapes.
It is.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from the intricate details of aphid feeding to the potential of satellite imagery and AI to transform the way we approach pest management. I always find it amazing how seemingly small creatures like aphids can have such a significant impact on our food systems and the global economy.
It's a reminder that even the tiniest organisms can play a vital role in the delicate balance of ecosystems and the challenges we face in feeding a growing population.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on today, from the fascinating biology of aphids to the transformative potential of technology in agriculture. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'd simply encourage everyone to stay curious and engaged in learning about the complex world of agriculture and the role technology is playing in shaping its future. There's so many exciting developments happening.
Yeah, there are.
And by staying informed and embracing innovation, we can work together to build a more sustainable and resilient food system for all.
Well said. And for those listening who want to learn more about Pharmanaut and the power of satellite imagery in agriculture, you can find links to their website and app in the show notes. And remember, the next time you see a ladybug in your garden, give it a nod of appreciation. Those little beetles are our allies in the fight against aphids. Until next time, happy gardening and farming, everyone.